Today's video is my final cocoa fiber basket repot for the upcoming growing season. Let's have a look at this Epiphylla Cattleya Jackie Bright Hilo stars coming up at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and thank you for joining me in this repot video for my Epiphylla Cattleya Jackie Bright Hilo stars. So let's have a look at the tag real quickly here. This is an intergeneric hybrid, a cross between an epidendrum, a laelia, which has now been grouped with Cattleya, and then a Cattleya orchid, so Epiphylla Cattleya. Now, I have seen some reference to a slight name change here for this one to just now be called an Epicattleya, since Laelia has been grouped with Cattleya. But the name is the same, Jackie Bright Hilo stars. I will insert a picture of the bloom when I'm editing this video. Now, this orchid was deflasked in September of 2018, so it's 6-7 years old now. It is mature enough to bloom, although this orchid has not bloomed since it's been in my care for about the last 3 years. As with some of my other orchids, just from experience, I have a feeling that this is a light-based issue, and if I can get this orchid into a bit more consistent bright light, maybe I will be fortunate enough to get some blooms in the future. It is supposed to be a spring bloomer. We will see how that goes. It definitely has had time to adjust to the seasons in my area. Now, this particular orchid is a little bit thirstier, I have noticed, as compared to some of my other Cattleya orchids. I did a video about 2.5 years ago, and I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen about how to rehydrate thirsty orchid pseudobulbs, and I used this particular orchid as an example. So if you would like to go back and watch that, it was a great example of how this orchid can get a bit dehydrated, but how to get it back into a place where the pseudobulbs are not shriveled and wrinkled. So today I'll be using my Cattleya mix, my pre-made Cattleya orchid mix, and I will be adding just the tiniest bit of sphagnum because this orchid does prefer a bit more consistent moisture, and I'm hoping the cocoa fiber in this basket will also provide a bit more humidity as well as moisture retention. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a break here, get some paper towel laid out, and we will begin with the repot of this orchid. And yes, as would be expected, as soon as I begin to film an orchid video, the entire neighborhood fills with yard crews, weed eaters, mowers, blowers. So, if you hear some motors in the background, that's what's going on. Okay, let's get started with this repot. Orchids cannot wait for yard work to be complete. Okay, so this has been in this pot for about 2.5 years, definitely in need of some fresh media and a new growing environment. There's no way at all that it's going to cut loose from this pot with all of these old roots sticking through the bottom. It is a robust root producer, which is a good thing, but it has now exceeded the size of this pot. Actually, this is, a repot that I could have done last year easily, but, there are always a few orchids here and there that you just don't get around to. Okay, now, all of the ones that I cut off the bottom here, all of the roots on the bottom were dead, maybe with the exception of one. And let's see if we can get this to come out of the pot now. You have to give it a bit of a squeeze. There are some roots growing through the side slits, which may also cause a problem here and there. definitely a root-bound situation. It's going to take a little bit more of a aggressive approach here. Definitely trying not to break any of the new growth at the top of the orchid. And there is a new root already beginning to develop from the new growth, which is, you know, a good indication that this is a opportune time to repot this orchid so that the new roots can go down into the new media. Okay, so the bark here, it looks like I used my Cattleya mix when I repotted this about 2.5 years ago, but it is a good bit broken down now. There is a tiny bit of a musty smell to this. It's making me think that a quick hydrogen peroxide spray along the way would not be a bad idea. And most of the bark is falling away easily, but it will need a rinse at the sink. Okay, so let's have a look here. There are 2 new growths, one right here and one right here. The larger of the 2, and it's probably going to be impossible to see on the camera because it's a bit buried, does already have a new root coming from the larger of the 2 new growths. So this orchid will be putting down a new root system as its next step in the growth cycle. Okay, and as well, just kind of a quick inspection here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 or 10 other pseudobulbs. The older part of the plant is back here where the smaller pseudobulbs are that have already lost their leaves at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. The newer growth is more here in the middle and over to this side. And it looks like possibly these leaves are beginning to yellow. So this older pseudobulb may be dropping these leaves in short order. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the sink real quick, give it a rinse, and we will be back with a root trim. Okay, so back from the sink. The green roots are clearly still alive. The white roots might be alive, but if they're brown and mushy, then they are clearly dead. But I will still have to kind of go through all of this tangle of root system and kind of feel one by one to decide what to cut away. All right, so the yard crew noise is still going strong, although I do have to sort of sympathize with their situation. We have had so much rain that they probably haven't been able to get around to all of the yards to do the work that they do on a week-by-week basis. Day before yesterday, and this made the national news, so even if you're not from Southeast Texas, you may have seen this on national news like the Weather Channel and others. Day before yesterday was the intense storm that passed through the Houston area and left a wake of destruction that's just unbelievable. Downtown Houston just covered in glass because of all of the windows that broke from the high-rise buildings. Some other areas of Houston have trees completely uprooted, large trees completely uprooted. There were at least 2 tornadoes sighted, one I think near downtown Houston and then another one in the Katy area. And then in downtown Houston, I think they recorded straight line winds over 100 miles per hour. So definitely a lot of problems left behind. Major electrical poles and whatnot just completely crumpled. So many are still without power, and probably will be for days and weeks to come because the repairs are just out of sight. Now, where I live, which is somewhat kind of like southwest of Houston, we were on the fringes of that. We did have a really severe thunderstorm again with some pretty strong winds, although I have to say I did not bring the orchids in this time and nothing was damaged. So you know, there is a little bit of wind protection in my backyard, not only from the trees but from the fence that goes around the perimeter of the backyard. So there is a little bit of protection back there. So yeah, I'm really rather tired of all of this threatening weather this spring. It has just been, seems like every week we have had something, and each time it seems to be rather destructive. Now, the other thing, of course, that's going on with all of this ongoing rain is that the rivers that pass through the area are very high. And so when it rains north of here, you know, we're kind of downstream of some of the rain that has been occurring. And so, you know, water is running towards the Gulf, and as it comes downstream, the rivers are more and more swollen, and they are in many cases past the flood stage. And so a lot of homes and property are, you know, destroyed by that situation. Yeah, so we've just been having a really tough time of it in this area with all of the severe weather. Now, I guess back to the orchid. As I am trimming the roots here, you're probably noticing that a lot of it is, you know, being cut away. And it is true that a lot of the root system was dead. So another, you know, sort of indication that a good repot with fresh media will help this orchid along here. And I'm pretty intentional about feeling the roots, you know. If there's any doubt about whether the root is alive or dead, you know, it's usually not the case, but if I'm in doubt, I do leave it, just because, you know, the orchid needs as much support as it can get from its root system. This one is kind of iffy. I think it's dead. As is this one. And you can always trim off just a portion of a root. You know, if the bottom portion of it seems dead and the upper portion still seems alive, you know, you don't have to cut the entire thing. You can just cut off the portion that is clearly not living. Okay, so yeah, there are still a few, you know, green roots here. The new growth will be putting down a new root system to support the plant, so all of that is great. So this is kind of what we're left with here. Now let me get this mess a little bit cleaned up, and I will be back to repot this in the basket lined with cocoa fiber. There was a previous video that I did several weeks back that talked a bit more about the cocoa fiber, how to actually line the basket, and was more of a demonstration of that particular process. So I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen if you would like to go back and watch the first couple of orchids that I put into the baskets with the cocoa fiber, you know, if you want more detail about how to get that started. Okay, so I'll be right back, and probably off camera I'm going to spray this with 3% hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so for potting media today, I'm just using my Repot Me Cattleya Imperial Orchid Mix, and there's the label on the bag if you would like to seek that out. I am in no way sponsored by Repot Me, but I do use many of their orchid mixes. And then I will also be mixing in some of their New Zealand sphagnum moss. All right, so here's our basket. And I'm just going to do a little quick depth check here. And yeah, we can definitely put some media and sphagnum down in the pot. Oh, and something interesting just happened. I'll show you in a minute. Definitely put some media down in the bottom and layer in a little bit of the sphagnum. And what I just pulled out is probably enough for the entire repot. Okay, so something interesting happened when I just pulled this plant away from the camera. It very, very easily came into two different pieces. Not necessarily a problem. I don't know if it was originally two plants or if somehow the rhizome broke into two pieces. Doesn't really matter. It's two pieces now. But now that this has happened, you can see some additional roots coming out right here, which we want to make sure gets close to the new media. I wasn't able to see that root development before. And it will give me a little bit of an opportunity maybe to reposition this plant so that the growth points are going in opposite directions, which might long term make the plant a little bit more balanced. Okay, now that is still too deep inside the basket, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fill in with some bark, and then I'm going to pull up on the plant. Now, because this was, you know, a plant that had pseudobulbs at various different heights, and now that this is being repotted, I do want to make certain that those older pseudobulbs are, you know, not totally buried, and, you know, I don't want the rhizome to be completely buried either. So I am sort of having a look-see and making sure that the plant is oriented in such a way that the older pseudobulbs are not buried. Now let me go ahead and press here. Now, one of the things about this basket repotting, and I noticed this when I did the first couple of orchids, the sides of the basket, because of the cocoa fiber, and I think just because of the nature of the bark and the cocoa fiber in the basket, is that it's a little bit sort of not as sturdy as potting in a pot. Good, bad, or otherwise, that's just the nature of it. So as I'm pressing down on the bark, I'm noticing, you know, some give on the sides that you wouldn't get if you were repotting in a pot. So, because of that, and because a lot of the older root system was trimmed away, this is the tiniest bit wobbly inside this basket. And it's not maybe as sturdy as what it's going to need to be. So, I do believe I will find some short stakes and, you know, figure out how to stake this in a way that makes it a bit more stable. Okay, I'm going to go look for those stakes and I'll be right back. Okay, so 2 stakes here, one for each plant. I'm going to put them around an older pseudobulb with a butterfly clip. And it's best to always put the hinge of the butterfly clip against the stake and not the plant, because it could cause some mechanical damage to the orchid if the hinge rubs up against the tissue. Okay, so there's one, and that really has stabilized that. And let's see, where do I want to put the other? Maybe right here on the opposite side. And again, the hinge against the stake and the little clasp around the tissue of the plant. And that has really stabilized that as well. Okay, so new growth here, which will hopefully begin to go a bit more in the upwards direction here shortly. And on the other piece of the plant, a new growth right here. The new little roots now are in the media, just right at the surface of the media, and all of the older pseudobulbs are not completely buried. So let's have a little look here at the top of the pot. Okay, so the final thing for this basket is the chain, and I think I showed this on the very first video that I did using these baskets, but it is a 3-point chain with a little hook at the end, and this one will be hanging somewhere out near the Orchid Hut, gosh, probably before this video even processes on YouTube. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button is coming up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Thank you all so much for watching, and talk to you next time.